We've got 25 in the room, according to my master. We're going to start this thing. DePaul, how you doing, my friend? Retired Butcher Boys checking in from California. Jewel Rod from Puerto Rico. Dave Rogers asking about the hail. Apparently, Kansas got hit with some hail. He wants to know, do we have hail here in Michigan? Yeah, we do from time to time. In fact, I think it was last summer, maybe, that some towns near me got hit with kind of a pretty heavy hail. Where it blew by my place, it was just kind of BB sized, maybe a little bit bigger, nothing bad. But I know people whose houses sustained damage, and entire car dealerships where every car parked outside got totaled by the hail, taking out windshields and all the upward facing sheet metal. So that'll do it for you. Locked on Law. I was in Grand Rapids in February. We did not get hail. We got snow, a lot of it. Yeah, we have more snow than hail. So it depends on how you go. D Wood says, hi, Steve. Read your comments in a Freep interview. Great to see Jay Leno's Turbine car back on the road. I may have to move this camera. I put it in a place that's causing me to not be able to read the comments fully. And now am I centered? Close enough? No? Got to go that way maybe a little more? How's that? There we go. That'll work. Yeah, the Detroit Free Press ran an article on Friday night about Jay Leno's Turbine car, in which they quoted me a couple times because I spoke to the reporter. Detroit News did an article, did not quote me. I had somebody actually call me and say, Steve, how come the Detroit News didn't quote you? And I'm like, it's Jay Leno's Turbine car, not mine. And I was at the show yesterday, and I saw the car run. We'll talk about that just in a second. Maybe we can populate this room a little bit more. Dave Rogers, looking forward to winter and snow. Chris, good to see you. Good to see you, Steve. And to you, my friend. I did a live stream on Tuesday with 3,000 people in the room. 3,000. Didn't realize it. Like, I looked at the number, I'm like, whoa. Mad Header checking in from OKC. Zrathas, hello all. Salguco, what? Noon Central already? We're early. Yeah, we're 7-8 minutes early. What are you going to do? Duncan Campbell, hey, Steve. See, we're doing this for our Australian friend, Duncan, because who knows what time it is in Australia. Which, by the way, being from Australia, the question is Duncan as mortified as the rest of us by what passes for breakdancing in Australia? Not a big breakdancing fan, but the Olympics called that on the question. Gary Towner from North Idaho, Vinan Veleth, finally able to join in. Momo, hola, Mr. Steve. I had a client who called me Mr. Steve. Mr. Steve. Rain Yada Yiz, hello from the Idaho. From Idaho. The Idaho would be different. Michael Yu, hi from Charlotte, North Carolina. President Trump. Steve Lehto, the greatest of all time. Locked on Law, Turbine Cars, I'm a big fan, as am I. Monroe, hi from North Dakota. I'm probably mispronouncing your name, but I can't quite see what it's supposed to be. Manuel Guerra, hello, Steve. I apologize, my friend. I know you were at the Dream Cruise yesterday. I was up at the north end. And by the time the rain came around 2:30 or 3 o'clock, I was worn out. I'd had a very, very busy day up to that point. Did not actually get out and do the whole loop like I normally would like to once or twice. Joshua Gibson, Cumberland Plateau here. The Cannonball. Greetings from the PRDA and the Cannonball gang. APOC operative, hello, Steve, from Marathon Petroleum in Minnesota. We're brewing up some of that delicious race fuel. Fresh brewed race fuel. Got to dig that. Bruce R., good morning, Mr. Lehto. Johnny Quest, did it rain during the cruise? Yes, it did, but it was periodic, and it was those cells. Like a cell would go by and just hammer someplace, and a quarter mile up the street would be dry. It was the craziest thing. We'll get there. Ed G., we're going to need a bigger room. I need a bigger boat, too. Tom Rates, Pittsburgh Tom here. Toxic Weiss. Hey, Steve, hope you're doing well. Just saw your video on the Elvis estate. Makes me wonder what the craziest scam you've ever seen is. Well, that's one of the weird ones, because I don't think there's any way on earth that could have worked. I mean, it was not exactly criminal genius behind that. The only way it possibly could have worked is if the family had gotten so scared that they paid money to keep it out of getting into the news. But of course, what got into the news was the impending auction. And until the auction was announced, I don't think anybody was worried about anything. So it was a poorly thought out thing. And I suspect that someone might be going to jail, but we'll see. 445 Brett, hey, Steve, great show. Glad I didn't have to resubscribe yet today. You know, I had people tell me that. They go, Steve, it's the weirdest thing. I'm subscribed to your channel, and all of a sudden I notice I stopped getting notices. Now I guess I'm not subscribed, and it's like, I don't know what to tell you. The subscriber numbers keep going up, but apparently some people get unsubscribed for whatever reason. So you want to check that from time to time. Native Atheist, what's up? Norman, Oklahoma. Norman, Oklahoma. Norman is just such a guy's name, I mean, it's like Dave, Oklahoma. I mean, there might be one, I don't know, but Norman, Oklahoma. Mike Torello, good afternoon, Steve. C Perceptions Music, hi from Washington State. Hobie Jackson from Northeast Texas, hello. Tio Rica, howdy, watching from the Balkans, originally from Grand Rapids, but you find yourself in the Balkans? How'd that happen? Mindbend from Southgate, back from Ames, Iowa. John Laurie, so how'd you get interested in picking locks? I actually had some friends who back in the day were good at it. And they showed me how if you got good at it, how easy it was, and it scared me. And then I'd forgotten pretty much all about it until I saw the lock picking lawyer. And I love that guy's videos. They're hilarious. To me, they're endlessly entertaining. And it's exactly what YouTube was designed for. It's a video of just the guy talking in his hands as he manipulates locks. And I never would have guessed it work as well as it does. The guy's got millions of subscribers. So Tom rates GT260 from Sunoco is great. You remember Sunoco? They had the different grades. 260, Beata Graf Avdel Hagen, ahoy hoy. Ahoy hoy from Oregon. And Duncan says it's nearly 3 a.m. I think that event is something added to the list of things we don't talk about. That event. The breakdancing at the Olympics. Ed Zell. Next time you go to New York, take Highway 3. Go through Waynfleet, Ontario. I always, it depends on whether I come in from Port Huron or come in from Detroit, but I often cut across Canada to get to New York and points beyond. And it's the 401, the 402, and the 403. Now, let's forget which order they go in, because obviously it's not numerical depending which way you're coming from. But I know that those freeways are nice and straight and well maintained. STP World says the judge was suspended for a few days who arrested the student. Yeah, I did an update on that Tuesday night. That was the live stream I did. He's also been ordered to take some kind of sensitivity training classes of some sort. So Emmanuel says, I got to ride in the Saline S7 on Woodward to Saline Alley. Unforgettable. DePaul says YouTube does unsubscribe you randomly. It's never happened to me, but I don't subscribe to a whole bunch of stuff. Tom rates, do you know why is it the Pennsylvania rules of evidence include rules not adopted? Does Michigan do that? I've seen it before where they'll show a rule that's up for adoption or up for consideration, but if a rule is not adopted, then there would be no reason to publish it among the added rules. As a member of the Michigan State Bar, I can tell you the State Bar Journal, which comes once a month, in the back has proposed rule changes, whether it's the rules of evidence, procedure, and other things, Supreme Court orders and so on, will be published there, and they are there for comments. But of course, I'm not sure about unpublished rules. So what I dislike the most is unpublished opinions. Our courts of appeal will issue an opinion on a novel topic and a novel ruling and say, but that's unpublished. It's like, wait, why isn't it published now? And by the way, they publish it as unpublished. So it literally makes no sense, and it makes no sense either. So there you go. Gregory Ciota, hello from California. Help. Own it jumped on me. Dave Rogers, where's Gilbert today? I'm sure she'll check in. And I got a note from the Canadian robot lady last week. She said, oh my gosh, I forgot. And she had something else going on. And I said, no, that's okay. That's okay. If you have things going on that you got to take care of these. What we're doing here is an informal little gathering. I'd call it a coffee clatch, but there's no coffee. I forgot what language clatch is. That German? Oh, boy. Michael Johnson says, good afternoon, Steve from Westland, Michigan. I saw a Turbine car yesterday. Did you see it at the Dodge display, or did you see it at the Williams International display? I was at the Williams International display, and I had a guy walk up and go, hey, you're Steve Lehto. I said, yes, I am. Thank you. But Not a banned account asks, should car companies charge subscription features? I'm a firm no on that one, but that's not a legal issue in the sense that it's just whether they're going to do it or not. And it's going to be the marketplace that decides, to where if people won't pay the subscriptions, then they're probably going to have to go away and do it another way. Lisa Davis from Winona, Minnesota. There's also a Winona in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Neat little town. It's a ghost town now. My mother taught elementary school at a building that still stands up there, the old Winona School, which I think at the time was kindergarten through 12. Not a banned account asks, can a former U.S. president legally serve prison time? In theory, I would think so. In theory, I mean, I don't want to get political here, but and let's try not to. Okay. Oh, hi, Steve. A question from the video about Disney saying that the husband could not sue since he signed up for Disney Plus. How can their streaming services terms of service dictate a physical goods sale? Well, they're going to say, we had a contract and we said, if you want this product, you got to agree to all these things. And if you agree to all these things, and one of them is you can't sue us for something over here. And you're right. Most people would look at that and go, there's such a huge disconnect that nobody would anticipate that. Then you get into the argument about whether or not you can enforce something that people wouldn't expect and probably didn't read, when the person who drafted the language probably knew that the person wouldn't read it. And you'll get into an issue on contractual interpretation at that point. Depends on the state and the judge. And the better argument, I thought, was that the tickets that the guy bought to get into Disney World also had a terms of service on it. I'm surprised he didn't just stick with that one. But keep in mind, I believe that the restaurant where the meal was served was apparently outside of the portion of Disney World you got to pay to get into, meaning that anybody could walk up there without doing terms of service. And so the guy had signed the terms of service. And the question is, does that address a meal he purchases on that trip outside of the gates of what he was agreeing to the terms of service for? And so these are all good questions. They will get litigated. And keep in mind that no matter what, lawyers can tell you what the law is, what past decisions have been, and whether or not you have this situation or that situation, and what you hope will happen, but we can't see the future. And occasionally judges do goofy things. So, not a banned account. Since corporations are people, can they be elected president? No. Because the Constitution defines what qualifies someone to run for president, and there's a bunch of things in it that would not apply to corporations. And I mean, it would take a real stretch to make the argument. So Lisa Davis says there is a Winona, Texas. Okay. Lone Wolf Wayne, hi Steve from Texas. Hope is well. I'm just recovering from a bad B-day yesterday, a bad birthday. You celebrate too hard. So David Zeranansky, wouldn't the arbitration agreement fail to survive the end of the contract for streaming? Most people would say that's what they would expect, but they make the argument all the time that you sign up for this, you agree to this, and presumably when you stopped with this, you'll have no relationship with us on this anyway, so who cares? But in the rare occasion, like Disney's got their tentacles in several different things. But that's an argument you can make with the judge. So see what happens. Tommy Turner. Hey, Steve, Williamsburg, Virginia here. Thanks for all the conversation fodder for talking with all the law school students I meet at breweries around here, especially on civil asset forfeiture. Locked On Law says no one comes here to discuss politics. Sadly, some people do, but that's not what we're here for. It's not the purpose of our gathering. Robert B says the M1 Concourse was a bust. Weather must have scared people away. We stayed for an hour, then drove down to some other cruise happenings, and all free except for parking. The M1 is on Woodward, but it's off of Woodward in the sense that there's a fence there. And I've heard of parties happening in there, and I've never been to one during the cruise. I've had people say that, you're not on the avenue. So in a second, I will tell you about my experiences yesterday. Trisha Arnold checking in from Kansas. Mrs. Teresa, hey, Steve, I got you. I hope you're having a great weekend. Oh, yeah. Brian Bloomer says, hi, Steve. Was the Graceland woman Mrs. Avery? No. I just want to talk to her. It'll only take a while. So yesterday, the Dream Cruise, I told you if all went well that Jay Leno would get his turbine car back because it had been repaired. And I knew some of this stuff from behind the scenes because of my relationships with some of the people at Williams International, including my brother who works there. And the car got repaired. And so they said, we're going to give it to Jay on the morning of the cruise. And the weather looked so sketchy that they decided to give him the car at Williams International, which is about 5 miles from the tip of the cruise. So my brother called me that morning and said, hey, change of plans. Meet me at Williams. That's where we're doing the first thing. So I went to Williams International, got there real nice and early. They had the car set up in front of the building, in front of the Williams sign. And Jay wasn't there yet. And then as the morning rolled on, Jay arrived. WDIV sent a film crew. Jay Leno's people arrived, meaning that he had his film crew for Jay Leno's garage. There's other people there filming stuff. And there came a time when somebody said, hey, we've got all the film and interviews out of the way. Jay, here are the keys to your car. Jay gets in his car and fires it up. And remember that the car broke down on him in California 3 years ago. In the meantime, he shipped the car here. It got taken apart, put back together again. Took a while. And then the car now runs. And then he drove the car off into the sunset. And by that, I mean that was about 10 o'clock in the morning, maybe. And there were some other things happening on Woodward Avenue. And a bunch of very important people were at these different events. And I talked to one of them who is a very, very high-ranking official at Chrysler. And Jay agreed to take the turbine car first to a Dodge display down on Woodward and talk to people, do interviews, and show the car there. And then he drove up Woodward in the car and came into the Williams party up in Pontiac and brought the car in. And, of course, that party was packed, and they had a space set off for it. And rolled it in there. Jay talked, and then Jay hung out for several hours. I'm guessing 3, 4. No. I'm sorry. Back up. About 2 hours. Jay was there for about 2 hours, a little over 2 hours. And gracious, just walking around, shaking hands with people, taking pictures, holding babies. I mean, just unbelievable how nice he was. And, talked to everybody, answered questions. And they had the big display that explained what the car was all about and all the repairs and all that stuff. And then there were people there from the media. Detroit News showed up, photographers, you name it. And then somewhere around 2 o'clock, Jay had to leave, so Jay left. And then the car, they decided they wanted to get it out of there in case it started to rain. So Greg Williams, who's the president of Williams International and the son of Sam Williams, who's the guy who founded Williams and had worked at Chrysler on the turbine car program when it began, Greg Williams got in the car with my brother and Greg's son, and they fired the car up, backed it up, spun it around, and drove it off and took it back to Williams International with a police escort, no less. So I got to see the car run. I got to see Jay, talk to Jay for a few minutes. And like I said, people were at the party of Williams. He literally took pictures with anybody and everybody who asked. I did not see anybody walk up, get disappointed. And he was chatting with people and talking to people and answering questions and just being a heck of a nice guy. So it was a lot of fun at that yesterday. And like I said, I got to I got to see the car run actually before Jay did, but that's okay. That's okay. Not a band account. When is Ford selling the Nucleon? Still waiting. Yeah, no, that's a funny joke. Back in the 50s and 60s, car companies would put a car on display and go, "Hey, that's a car we're thinking about selling." They almost never did. And they displayed a car called the Nucleon. It's nuclear powered. And so every now and then you'll see a meme or a joke on the internet where people go, "Hey, don't forget that Ford once tried to sell a nuclear powered car." No, they didn't. They mocked up a car that they said if they were put in production, it would be nuclear powered. They didn't actually have the engine issues worked out yet. So they never actually had a nuclear powered car. Bob Koff wondering what class of ham radio license you have. I do not have one. I do not have one. I get asked that about once a week. I am not a ham. Just a lot of people in the audience are. I've got friends who are. One of my brothers is. You know, I mean, I know guys old school who can still do Morse code really, really fast. Oh, D Woods and the operator says 40 cents more for the next 3 minutes. Please, Mrs. Avery. By the way, that is a true story in case you didn't know that. Shel Silverstein, who wrote Sylvia's mother, actually tried to call up his girlfriend, Sylvia Pandolfini, an ex-girlfriend, because he found out she was getting married, and the mom wouldn't let him talk to her. And later on, he wrote a song about it. He just changed the name because Pandolfini didn't work quite as well as Avery. But it's absolutely true story, at least according to Shel Silverstein, who also wrote the Unicorn Song and A Boy Named Sue. So there you go. QA Library, who agreed for the cruise to clash with Pebble Beach? Well, that's been going on for quite some time. Pebble Beach is off on the same weekend. I don't think that's that big of a conflict between Pebble Beach and the cruise, as in the cruise and back to the bricks. But is Lisa Davis leaving? Oh my gosh, I have to go. Bye, everyone. I saw people saying goodbye to her, and I didn't realize that she was leaving. I thought you guys were joking. I'm so sorry. Bye. Maybe she's already left. JP, I just packed 16 t-shirts for my latest travels into a box. I'll put it in the mail tomorrow. Lots of cool stuff. I assume you mean you're mailing those to me? I got to clear more space off my racks. I just added 5 more. Oh, I think it's about 250 in the rotation over here, but I put the new ones at the front and then they work their way in. JP is a world traveler, and I understand he just did a tour of some portions of Canada I've never been to. So I'm looking forward to the shirts. Mark Miller, hey, Steve Lehto, sup? Oh. Laura Thompson, I love Silverstein. My favorite books are The Light in the Attic and Where the Sidewalk Ends. Of course, and The Giving Tree. Yes. Shel Silverstein. It's interesting. I didn't quite ever make the connection that he was the guy who wrote those songs, because those songs and the children's books, but the children's books are actually quite smart. You know what I'm saying? So it makes sense. AJ Stone says Dr. Hook. Yes, Dr. Hook is the band that performed Sylvia's mother. So Gilbert says my Sharona was written about a true girl by Fieger's brother. Yeah, because is it Doug Fieger? Geoffrey Fieger is the attorney, and he had a brother, older brother, I believe, who was in a band called The Knack. And they had a hit with My Sharona. And also, don't forget, Good Girls Don't. But the funny thing about Fieger is that who'd have thought that his brother, Geoffrey, would be the star in the family? Lewis Browning, what happened to the consecutive numbered ink-stained error dollar bills? You mean the ones you sent me? I've got them. They're pressed in a book on the set someplace, but unfortunately, if I put them on display, nobody would know what they were, and they get confused and say, "Is that the $100 bill? Did you replace it with a 1?" So I appreciate that though, and it jumped on me. Yortabio. I'm guessing that's how you say it in Finnish. Good evening from Finland, where it is 8 p.m. and temperature is 73 F, which is 23 Celsius. Someone else can tell us what that is in Kelvin. Maskilla 469, hi from Nome, Alaska. Oh, by the way, that article in the Free Press yesterday or Friday night about the Dream Cruise mentioned me a couple times, and I got an email from a dear friend of mine who's an attorney in Alaska, and he's, "Hey Steve, there's an article about you in the Free Press that mentions Jay Leno." So, hey, Johnny Knoxville's late. He's fashionably late. He's here. Up way too late. Slept too long. Just here to hear if you need a traffic lawyer after yesterday. I know a guy. I did not do anything crazy in my Viper. I had it out on Woodward. By the way, for those of you who are very curious about this, I drove it there and it didn't rain at all on the drive in. So I had some fun, going through the gears a little bit. And then it poured rain for like 5 minutes and then it stopped. And finally, when I left, I drove on some wet streets, but did not drive through any rain. So the car got damp, but not soaked. What I can tell you. Not a banned account. Where can we buy a Chevy Nova SS in good condition? You talking about the classic Nova? Those are good cars. I saw a bunch of them yesterday at the cruise, but you can find them now, but they cost more money than they used to. I remember when you could pick up a Nova for like $300. That's one that ran, and you can do all kinds of stuff with those cars. So, George Smith, where did you go on your cruise? I'm talking about the Woodward Dream Cruise. I was at the north end of it. Woodward Avenue goes up and circles around Pontiac and comes back down again. There's a private party up there held by the company that rebuilt the engine in Jay Leno's Turbine car. So, DePaul, how was the police enforcement activity yesterday? I don't know. There have been years where there's cops out on Royal Oak sections of Woodward just writing tickets like it's like handing out speeding tickets to the Indy 500 as as Martin Sheen's character said in Apocalypse Now. But the only police I saw yesterday are the ones giving Jay Leno a police escort in his Turbine car to the site, and then give the Turbine car an escort out when it was being driven by Greg Williams. But that was pretty cool. But they were just there to maintain order. And not a banned account. This is where can I buy a Ford truck to tow the Chevy? Yeah, you'll get a lot of people saying, and where can I buy a Chevy truck to tow the Ford? But I hate to get into those kinds of squabbles because I tell people I base my experiences on my own. I base my opinions on my own experiences. And that people go, oh my God, you're an attorney and you own an Explorer. Yeah, I've owned 6 of them. Never had any problems with any of them. So. Mrs. Hayes, when do you think there might be updates on that Disney case? Well, I'm sure there's going to be some court rulings very soon. And so you'll have 2 updates, if the court rules on throwing the case out or not, and then if the case goes to trial. So I'll try to do both of those, assuming it makes sense. George Smith, hi from Gwinnett County, Georgia. Is it Gwinnett or Gwinnett? Hey, Alex Michael says, greetings from Scotland. Videos by Al, what does a burnout ticket cost? The sad part is that they tend to charge those as reckless driving. So the cost is going to be a bunch of points on your license, possible jail time, fines and costs that you won't believe. And if you want to fight it, you can have a jury trial. I've actually tried those cases before with mixed results. Some people think they're harmless, some people don't. And you can't always load the jury with people who see how you do, things the way you do, with whether or not a burnout is dangerous. I had a guy do a burnout where he had a line lock to where his front tires were locked solid, and he spun his back tires, and the cop goes, that's reckless driving. And I got that one reduced, but you never know. John Nowak Jr., alive and well, I'm guessing, in Corpus Christi. Maskilla says, hunt that posi rear end for the Nova. Mr. Steal Your Girl or Mrs. Teal Your Girl. Steve, what's your favorite food? It depends. It depends. I like a good filet mignon from time to time. But I also eat my share of pizza, so it depends. It's more like if you're going to eat a pizza, what you have in your pizza, or if you're going to go to a American style restaurant, what are you going to have, but it depends. I know some really, really good restaurants that I go to quite often, but I often get different things there. DePaul says, market nostalgic motors for classic Chevy. Yeah, Mark can find you anything, but you can go online if you're simply looking for like an old SS Nova, you can find those. QA library, what from your experience cars break down the least? That's hard to say, and I hate to give that answer because people think, well, you're a lemon law lawyer, you should know. But no, it has to do more with the fact that my experience is the cars that can't be fixed is usually because the dealerships are failing, not because of the manufacturer. Your Tavio says my real name is Jorma Tapio. Jorma Tapio. And I'm close in that pronunciation. I'm close. Gilbert says, love my Explorers. I've had 3. I've got two right now. I've got one that's got 170,000 miles on it. It's going to drive for another 20 years. Tim Nossum's checking in from Colorado. Dr. Rick, hi, Steve. Love your live streams. Thank you. Roger Sliney, greetings from Australia. Checking in from down under. Ricky Craig says about Toyota starting to catch fire. You mean literally? I've not heard about that yet, but it wouldn't surprise me. Once in a while, you hear about weird things. Hot Rod Al, did you see Mark Lieberman? Yes, Mark Lieberman was there. And by the way, he was there because, among other things, he helped with the repairs of Jay Leno's Turbine car. And it was his shop that put the engine back in the car. So when Williams International fixed the engine in the car, they had it on an engine stand. They had it running on an engine stand. Well, now you got to put that back in the car. So you really need to have mechanics who are masters do that. And so Mark and his guys did that. And it was at his shop that the car first fired up and ran since the 3 years ago when it failed on Jay. So, yeah, I saw Mark yesterday, had a good time talking to him. He's got a good friend named Adam Lukachel, who I know pretty well also. We sat around and talked about cars when we weren't doing other stuff. So, Bernadine Sackinger, who do you want to win the Battle of Kursk this time? Is that a political question? It was so strange. I saw the name Kursk pop up in the news, and I'm like, what? I thought that ended. I thought that ended like, I don't know, 75 years ago or something. But, yeah, no, it's wild stuff over there. Redneck Coder says, besides auto insurance, what other products do we buy based on sucks the least criteria? You are onto something there. And the reason I say that, among other things, is watch advertising for insurance companies. I bet foreigners come to America and watch our television and go, wait a second, everybody here is sick and needs insurance that's priced cheaply. And I'm talking about the prescription ads is the first half of that joke. And the ads are always, we charge you less. We charge you less. Nobody ever says they're going to pay claims. No, we charge you less. We cost less than them. We cost less than them. And look at how that works with other products. Can you imagine? Open up a restaurant. Don't talk about your food except our food costs less than theirs. Our food costs less than theirs. You go, how good is the food? But insurance is so serious. Homeowners insurance? The question is, do they pay claims? That's what I want to know. I'd rather pay more money for a company that pays claims. So call me crazy. Maskilla 469 says, I have a Ford Ranger with 350,000 miles on it, still going strong. Doesn't surprise me. Doesn't surprise me. Johnny Knoxville says, okay, I've seen it all. There's an upside-down GMC van driving at Woodward on the Dream Cruise. I saw photographs of that. A guy actually built a car that looks like it's upside down. It's pretty cool. The Lost Prussian says, I just came back from Mexico yesterday and customs never asked for my passport. They took a picture and verified my name. Are they using facial recognition? Probably. I can tell you when I've traveled internationally, there are places where you can cross a border. If you've got an American passport, they'll wave you through. At least they did when I was there. And I stopped once or twice. And can I get a stamp, please? Okay, fine. Click. So, J-Pole, why did it take 3 years? Was it a total rebuild? And they had to fabricate all the parts? Not all of them, but some of them. But yeah. And they were also doing it on weekends and in the evenings with volunteers, because Williams International is a company a lot of you don't know about because they're not in the news all the time talking about stuff. They just quietly build jet engines. And they agreed to do this. And when they took the engine apart, there were parts in there that are archaic, that they don't use anymore, like regenerators and so on. So they took it all apart. They had to refabricate some parts. They had to refurbish some parts. And then, of course, as they're putting it back together again, they'd encounter weird things. And plus, they were trying to figure out, and I'm not going to talk about this just yet, they were trying to figure out what caused it to fail initially, because it failed. And if you don't figure out what caused something to fail, you don't just put it back together again and hope it works. Now, don't get me wrong, it worked fine for 60 years. Maybe you get another 60 years before it fails again. But you want to know for sure that you don't just put it together and have it fail again. So they've got some ideas. I actually talked to one of the guys that my brother works with yesterday about this. And he said, well, here's what I think. And he rattled off like an order of how things happened that would make sense. And he goes, but don't quote me on that just yet. So somewhere down the road, we're hoping that we can say to a degree of mechanical certainty that we've figured out what caused the failure, because they fixed a bunch of stuff along the way that if it was that, they've solved it. But we don't know if that was the cause or if that happened because of something else. So it's kind of complicated with, how engines are, So not a banned account. Is modern insurance useful or a mandated scam? Well, it's useful. And keep in mind that of the 100 people who buy policies, 90 of them don't file claims at all. So they don't have a problem. The 10 people who file claims, if 5 of them get paid, well, then you got 5 left. It's a question what happens to those people. Do those claims get paid? And so I can tell you that I personally have had good experience with insurance companies. I don't file a lot of claims, though. So, I filed a claim 4 years ago when someone rear-ended my car, and it wasn't my fault. 5 years ago now. And my insurance had to pay for it because I'm in Michigan with no fault insurance. So I filed a claim, and they paid it, and they took very good care of me. But that's the first insurance claim I filed in 20 years. And that's how most people's experiences are. But I can tell you that I lived someplace once where there's a street I drove down, and a house burned to almost the ground. And I go by it, and there's this smoked out hulk of a house. Then one day somebody came by and boarded up all the windows. And about a month later, somebody wrote on the front windows in red letters this tall, insured by State Farm. Now, I think they were trying to make a point. I think they're trying to make a point. Because remember, the people who don't file claims are happy. It's how do they treat the ones who do file claims. So, Tornado James, glad to have seen you yesterday, and thanks for the autograph. Thank you, my friend. I'm standing in this group of people, 20 feet from Jay Leno's Turbine car, and we're talking. A guy walks up and says, excuse me, Steve. He goes, I watch your videos on YouTube, but on there you'd know me as Tornado James. But he introduced himself to me, and he goes, can I get your autograph? I said, sure. So I signed a hat for him. I also signed a couple of books, but thanks for checking in. I'm glad you did, because he told me, he goes, on YouTube, I'm Tornado James. Eddie the Mouth, they don't pay claims. Isn't that fraud? No, they claim it's breach of contract at worst. We have a contract to pay claims. If we deem the claim not worthy of payment, we just don't pay it. And if we're wrong, it's breach of contract. Some states have got bad faith. If you can prove they didn't pay it and they did so in bad faith, where you can get them punished, but that's less common. Most states it's viewed as a breach of contract claim, which in my mind is wrong, but that's how it is. So, hang on a second. Simple Al, ever have a claim with Haggerty Insurance? No. I think I've said on here, though, I actually do have Haggerty Insurance on my 2 classic, my 2 nicer cars, my 2 expensive cars. 2 as in the number, not TOO. They're not too expensive. Well, that's what you ask. Oh. Tim Nossum, is it true manufacturers will bring old concept cars to the cruise? They'll bring all kinds of stuff. I've seen all kinds of crazy stuff, including dealerships bringing crazy stuff to the cruise. It's worth visiting once if you can do it, to get there once to see all the crazy stuff that's down there. If innocent, what's wrong with talking to the police? I've seen a really good not documentary, but a video on YouTube about this, where this law professor says, that's the question. So a cop walks up to you and starts asking you questions. He goes, hey, we're talking to you about a murder that took place over here. And later on, you say, look, I had no idea about the shooting. We never said it was a shooting. Who said that? How did you know that? The only way you could know that is if you were the actual murderer. And so it's possible you can make mistakes like that will be used against you. And so keep in mind that you can remain quiet and they can't use that silence against you. So if it's serious, and don't get me wrong, if a cop walks up and asks you, hey, did you see this accident? And you saw it? Sure, I saw the accident. But they come knocking on your door and go, hey, we're investigating this extremely heinous crime, and you had nothing to do with it, you're usually better off saying, okay, let's close the door. So. Stephen Melantine, I apologize for saying Stefan, but I'm reading three things at once here. Did a lot of Finns immigrate to the UP and work in copper mines due to letters written back home speaking of opportunity and a place of cultural familiarity in the New World. That is actually a debate that sociologists have, because the largest concentration of Finns, I believe, outside of Finland is the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and then there's also a place in the Northwest. But in Hancock, for instance, they got street signs that are English and Finnish. There's Finnish flags everywhere and Finnish names everywhere. And there used to be a Suomi college there, which just recently closed. And the question is, where did the Finns come from and why? And there was opportunity in the mines. If you could simply work as an able-bodied adult, they'd hire you in the mines and you didn't need to speak English. And it's hard to go to another country if you don't speak the language and get a job. And they advertised in some of these other countries and said, look, you can come to America even if you don't speak English, and we'll hire you in a mine and pay you decent wages. And they were decent wages, but they're also tough living conditions. Now, I've heard a lot of people say that they came there because the Upper Peninsula reminded them of Finland. I'm not quite sure that had any impact on it, because, I mean, how do you know whether a place is going to remind you of someplace till you go there and remember? But I suspect a lot of times what it was early settlers would show up and go, oh my gosh, love the place, got a job, I can speak Finnish and get around. Come on over. And next thing you know, all the cousins are coming over. So, you know, of my great-grandparents, I've mentioned before, all 8 of my great-grandparents came over from Finland. And most of them settled in the UP. But a couple of them settled in Pennsylvania, where there's also a Finnish community. So, you know, looking for simple explanations as to, like, you know, what caused this. There's often many causes, and there's probably as many reasons as there are people who immigrated. But I suspect a lot of it had to do with the opportunity there and the fact that you could move into a community where you're recognized and you could get around. And that is also something. If I told you, hey, are you interested in a job in, and I just name some place that you've only heard of the country but you know nothing about, and you go, what language do they speak? And I say, they speak this weird, really, really weird language. And you say, okay, well, I have a job there. And I'm like, yeah, you have a job there, but, you know, you got to, and you're like, Oh, by the way, there's a community of 100 Americans, all your age, who all live in this little area. Now, are you interested? Suddenly, it sounds interesting. So there you go. Tigerman99515 says, Steve, Chrysler made other turbine cars besides the ones we were thinking about. Where are they? Yeah, they built 77 turbine cars in all, about 77, 78. 55 of them were the bronze turbine cars. The other ones, I believe, if they exist, are still in the Chrysler Archive collection, but they have not been displayed in quite some time, so we're not really sure what condition they are in. So, not a banned account says, can the police still legally stick their foot in your open front doorway without a warrant and come in and arrest you for assault when you try to shut it? I believe that's a question I've seen raised, because some people have filmed the police showing up at their place, talking to them and sticking their foot in the door. And the question is, at what point do they cross the threshold into your house? Did they need permission? Did you invite them when you opened the door? That's the kind of thing that only a jury could sort out, because I think that it would just depend on who's saying exactly what happened. So Momo said, I always wanted a Ford Explorer Sport Track. I've got a Ford Explorer Sport, which is a 2-door, but the Sport Track is the one with the weird pickup bed. Right? I've never owned one of those. Never really appealed to me, but then again, I don't haul a lot of stuff either. Brian W. says, burnouts are dangerous in public, no doubt. Well, the weird thing is you see more accidents at Cars and Coffee with people pulling out than you do with people doing burnouts at the Dream Cruise. In fact, I'm relatively certain that unless something changes, there have not been any injuries at the Dream Cruise by anybody doing anything crazy. And knock on wood, but you'd think that if burnouts were dangerous, that somebody would have gotten hurt by now. I can tell you a couple of years ago, somebody did hit a building with their car. I think they fired it up and then stepped on the gas and was in the wrong gear. And a driver flipped a Corvette, an older Corvette, and she claimed that the floor mat got stuck underneath the accelerator pedal. That's what she claimed. But the car flipped. She got a ticket for that. I know she had to go to court. I don't know what happened with it, though. So, John the Beagle Dad said, I do not like this overreach of modern cars. I may never get one. Yeah, I'm not too crazy about modern cars, and that's a funny thing. I've got two Ford Explorers right now. One is an 02, and one is an 04. I'm sorry, 2019. So I've had no 04 though, but yeah, 2019. And so the 2019's got the infotainment center on it, right? Mapping software and stuff. The 02's got a cassette deck. Okay, that's as analog as you can get. And so I told somebody I'm going to buy a 2025. I'm going to. I just haven't done it yet, but I'm going to. And they said, "Oh, you're trading the 02 finally?" I'm like, no, I'm not trading that thing in ever. That I will have that vehicle until it literally dies. By dies, I'm talking about catastrophic, like engine block failure or something. I don't care. I'll keep the thing on the road forever. So, Mr. Art Vandalay is complaining about the chair in my studio, saying it looks uncomfortable. But the thing is that it replaced the other chair that people said looked uncomfortable. And we've been through this so many times that I will not speak about it further. Drewski, what would be the ballpark cost to have the turbine rebuilt? Any idea? There is the question that I do not have an answer for, because Williams International donated all the volunteer help. All these guys and gals who worked in the program volunteered. If you kept track of like their hourly, how much time they spent on it and what they would charge for that time, if you broke it out of their salary, I wouldn't want to know. There were over 100 volunteers working on the program, over 100. And the cost of getting things recreated in all of these space age alloys and stuff, I have no idea. But I assure you, it's one of those things that if you are concerned about the cost, you can't afford it. Okay. So, oh boy. So I made the mistake of scrolling up to see if I missed anything, and I'm scrolling back down. Sorry. So Matt Dwyer says James Duane. Yeah, he's the one who made the video about the mistakes that you could make talking to the police, and they can use those against you. Next thing you know, you look guilty. So that's an interesting thing. A lot of people are pointing out that you could, of course, say, I'll talk to you as soon as I talk to my lawyer and bring him or her along. Josh, what's the difference between a burnout and chirping the tires illegally? Not much. Although doing a burnout from a dead stop, they call it an unsafe start. And let's suppose that you were to get in your Viper, for instance, and launch in first gear and then shift it into second and cause the tires to bark on that shift. That wouldn't be an unsafe start. But I suspect a cop could call it careless or reckless driving. Again, a well-trained driver can do that safely all day long and twice on Sunday, but tell that to the judge. So, Mass Killer 469 says, when I lived in New York City, I found a body and I called the police and they took me to the station and read me my rights. I told them I want to wear. That, sadly, is why some people don't want to get involved, because they know darn well there's a chance they're going to get blamed for something. So let's suppose that you're walking around in a building that's semi-abandoned, and you come around the corner and there's somebody who has just met their untimely demise, but you're not sure they might need medical attention because they might not be gone yet. Do you get involved? Because when you bend down to help them, you might leave DNA on their clothing. You might step in some blood and leave a footprint. Next thing you know, they go, hey, at the scene of the crime, we found DNA and a footprint of the killer. And so you've got to wonder if and that does, it probably drives some people to go, gee, I'd call the police, but next thing you know, they're going to call me and go, how'd you find that body? How long had it been there? Because you know where it was. It's not that easy to see. What were you doing over there? So next thing you know. So Tim Nossum gives the big old thumbs up, and I think is that a hippo flipping his hat around backwards? There you go. Dan Curry, I've purchased a 2024 Grand Highlander, but not able to take delivery because of a safety recall. Any idea on how long that's going to take? That's sad. I've had people tell me they've gotten a recall notice, but the parts aren't in yet. JP's checking out to go ride the Palmetto Trail for a while. Talk to you later. The man gets back in town. What's he do? He hops his bike and goes for a ride. Daniel Kester, Steve, how are you today? Hey, Daniel, it's good to see you, my friend. Daniel's a good friend of mine, and I like to make sure that he's okay, and he checks in on me from time to time as well. Mark Miller, could you say your foot slipped off the brake pedal as an excuse for burnout? See, that goes more towards intent and not towards what you did, because the cop could then say, oh, you weren't in control of your car. That makes you reckless or careless. Mark Doherty says, did you see a story about the police who got a man to plead guilty to killing his dad as just visiting his daughter? That's the craziest thing that some people have a hard time understanding, is that they can get people to confess to things they didn't do. And I've seen it before where they got somebody who was hopped up on something, for instance, or had a mental issue, who would say things and say things like, yeah, I might have, I don't know. And then later go, oh, what was I saying? Well, you said you might have. We all know what that means, right? So JP does say it's good exercise. No, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying a lot of people come back from a trip and want to just laze around for a little while. Blazer 02LS says, I had an officer pull me over one night after he determined I was driving in a spirited manner. He didn't realize I was one of the instructors for driver training in high speed and evasive maneuver classes. Oh, that's funny. I've actually known people who were pulled over by officers who then recognized them. It's always one of those things that they give you the professional courtesy of just the warning. Bob A. Bong. Hi, Steve. Hey, gang, from Niles, Michigan. Thanks for checking, my friend. Mad Michael's checking from Windsor. Is that Windsor, Ontario, or Windsor in the UK? Neuropilot. Incidentally, my friend said the MiG-29 RD-33 turbine rebuild kits are insanely expensive, like $5 million each, because they're done by U.S. engineers from scratch. $5 million? Wow. Grubby old patriot. The first 4 words of your sentence worried me because it says, hello, cleaning my goat. But then it says, after the cruise yesterday, first time it's been in the rain since 85. And he's referring to, I'm guessing, a GTO. Yeah, my car got a little splashed too, but it'll survive. But thanks for going to the cruise, regardless of which cruise you went to. Daniel got back yesterday from a Carnival's cruise, Panorama. J. Paul, do you follow any racing? Not really. If NASCAR's on, I'll watch it. If Indy's on, I'll watch it. F1, I'll watch it. But I kind of lost fascination with NASCAR when it became so unstock that they should remove the S from NASCAR. And that was a while ago. And Indy cars, I tend to watch the Indy 500, and that's it. I lost interest in the other ones. I never understood them taking Indy cars like on the streets of Detroit. That kind of thing made no sense to me. I mean, I remember as a little kid listening to Indy 500 on the radio because it didn't broadcast it live back then. How exciting it was. But then again, I also listened to Tigers games on the radio also. Beata Graf av Del Hagen asks Goat. Yes, Pontiac GTO, a car that Pontiac made back in the day, a muscle car. There's a version of it called the GTO Judge, the Judge. And of course, we now know GOAT, if it's all caps, is the greatest of all time. And GTO, for those you don't know, stands for Gran Turismo Omologato. And Omologato in Italian is basically the opposite of prototype, because if you're racing in a class of cars that requires the cars to be production models, that would be a GTO. And if it was not a GTO in that class, then it would be a possible a prototype or some other class. And so Pontiac basically borrowed that designation for a muscle car in the 1960s. So Blue Freaker says, you never signed up for anything. You only sign away their rights. Okay. Terry Goyen, I believe, is checking from Marin County, California, the possible typographical error there, but that's okay. There's apparently a conversation going on I know nothing about. Jimmy Hoffa's checking out later. Got to go. Just saw another documentary rehashing the Jimmy Hoffa case. And the narrator and all the guests kept saying Macus Red Fox, Macus Red Fox. It's Macus Red Fox. Gilbert will agree with me if she's still here. Macus Red Fox. Macus was a chain of restaurants in and around southeastern Michigan. A very good friend of mine's father was president or vice president of the corporation that owns them all. And my friend worked there for a while. Macus Red Fox. Minor point, but it's one of those things that locals go, ooh, that hurts. Ooh, that hurts. So Gilbert says, after seeing Indy driver Greg Moore expire at the Michigan Speedway, I never watched anymore. Yeah, the fatalities in auto racing have decreased. The cars have gotten safer. But I was watching, Dale Earnhardt race. And at the time you're like, oh, he crashed on the last lap. Okay. A little while later, like, oh no, this is serious. This is really serious. It's like, wow. Not a band that counts as modern cars are too bossy. Keep your eyes forward. So, Blue Freaker, thank you for letting me know what GTO stands for. Also, oopsie, I meant your rights to the person I was replying to. Caffeine makes me think faster than I act. That's okay. I talk faster than I think. So, Terry Goyen, yep, Marin. Jay Paul says, I think Hoffa ended up in Lake Michigan. The best explanation is that there were elements in Detroit that owned a garbage disposal company that also ran an industrial furnace, an incinerator, where they burned a lot of trash. And I personally think that is where he wound up. But that's based on simply looking at all of the different theories and asking yourself what's most likely. Because remember, these people didn't know they're going to get away with it. So they got to do something that they think is low risk. And that's the most low risk. Taking his body to New Jersey and burying it underneath the stands at a football stadium, that would have probably entailed too much risk. But if that's what you want to speculate about, there you go. Gilbert says, I went to Macus for my prom dinner. The one in Telegraph and Maple? Because that's the one where Jimmy Hoffa disappeared from. But there were a couple other Macuses. There was a Macus up on Woodward Avenue also. So Chuckster is checking in from Anaheim, California. Captain Kronk, how do you feel about electric muscle cars like the Dodge Charger? I'm not terribly excited about them just yet, but I know they're coming. Somebody else asked a question I wanted to address, and I lost it. And that's what happens. So sorry about that. Oh, Blazer 02LS says, same here when Dale passed. It seemed like they suddenly tossed the NASCAR cars in favor of everyone running cookie cutters like IROC. Yeah. And by the way, IROC was an interesting idea. They basically said, hey, we'll have all the racers show up and we'll have, 25, 30 cars that are identically matched. And then we'll just shuffle for cars. But then they discovered that certain cars were winning more often than other cars, which means they weren't equal anymore. Some are more equal than others. McCullough says, in the footing of a building in Detroit, that's another theory, is underneath one of the Renaissance Center towers. But again, to take him all the way down there, and some guy claims he's walking by, and somebody said, hey, dude, keep walking. You didn't see anything. After he saw something. I don't buy that 25 years later. So, Blazer says, I was there at Daytona that day. Wow. Tornado James says, I always thought GTO was like Z71 or Z28. No, it was. A GTO was a hopped up Le Mans. So you could buy a Le Mans or you could buy a GTO. But the GTO designation, I mean, they didn't just grab three letters out of midair like they do sometimes. It actually meant something. And in racing circles, many people said, oh, GTO, like a Gran Turismo Omologato. So Gilbert says 15 and Telegraph, that's the one. It depends on what year, because I think, didn't he disappear? Was it 75 or 77? Someone can correct me, but it was in the 70s there. So, oh, somebody asked what would be my favorite if I could pick a concert. That's a hard one, because are we talking about anybody living or dead? Can I put together a festival? Can I? I've mentioned before, I'm going to see ELO this year, and that's when I get to knock off the old bucket list. But I mean, I know guys, I've talked to people who saw some spectacular shows. I know a friend of mine who saw U2 at the Masonic Theater long before they were that big. You know, and you hear these kind of stories, you know. But that's the other thing is most of those big shows are in big places, and are you going to stand knee deep in mud at Glastonbury to see a headliner come out 6 bands later, that kind of thing? So, not a band. It counts as unions need to make a comeback. More steel mills. Some people would question those two are related to each other, and if so, how? But unions are doing okay. We knew they were on the decline in terms of membership. But don't forget the results they got recently negotiating with, I'm talking about the UAW, negotiating with the car companies. And they appeared to have quite a bit of sway then, didn't they? Well, Bill 57 says GTO could also stand for gas, tires, and oil. Mark Miller's got to go eat lunch. Gilbert says, my first husband's shop made the IROCs and pace cars street legal. Perfectly? Street legal performance. Street legal performance. One of these days we got to talk. You throw out so many of these things that make me wonder. Because IROC, remember that they use a couple different vehicles. They had the Camaros, and then they had the little Dodge Daytona things. And there was a time when they were also doing it with, like, you know, celebrity IROC, you know, that kind of thing. And so it's always fun to think about. I also think about, remember the was it called Superstars? The thing you did on the weekends on like Wide World of Sports, where they bring in athletes from different disciplines and have them compete against each other. And for some odd reason, Kyle Rote Jr., the soccer goalie from America, kept winning. I think he won more than once. Mine Ben says, if he's under the Renaissance Center, won't they find him? Did they knock the buildings down? They theoretically could. They are talking about possibly tearing those buildings down, which is amazing to think about. It's the most obvious visual of the city of Detroit as far as landmarks go. And it's the point where they're like, well, I might knock it down and put something else up there. So, Joni Techno, why do people hate Tesla? My husband's been getting the bird while driving. It's not Tesla so much. I think it's Elon Musk. But there are some people, I remember some people who thought that Tesla drivers were snobs. But I suspect it's more an Elon Musk thing, but I could be wrong about that. Pontiac 411 says Ray Evernham is trying to revive IROC. It's an interesting idea. I'm convinced that people will watch stuff like that, even like if you got a bunch of race car drivers and had them race go-karts for $100,000, people would watch that. It doesn't matter. This is the thing people don't get right. They don't understand. It doesn't matter if they're driving a car that costs $10 million and it has Tide or M&Ms on the hood. The race is the drama. And yeah, if a car crashes at 200 miles an hour and goes flipping and cartwheeling down the straightaway, yeah, people want to see that, right? But the drama of somebody racing and trying to get around somebody else actually is what people are watching. I watched the Olympics. I watched some of the Olympics. I didn't watch a lot of it. But there's a guy from Michigan named Grant Fisher who medaled in the 5K and the 10K. And he got bronze medals in each of them. And he wasn't favored to win. And in fact, I think the favorites won both of those races. But he was simply some guy who's like, well, he's an American, but Americans haven't been dominating that distance. Let's put it nicely. For the last few decades. Grant Fisher is from Michigan. And in both races. He hung on. He stuck right near the front of the pack. In the 10K, he had a little bit of a bobble because he was running on the inside. And somebody got too close to him. It's unclear who bumped who, but he bumped and he may have stepped even right up against the inside, the line of the track is actually a little tiny curb. Stepped on that or against that and kind of twisted his foot. But he kept going. And then, of course, in both cases, on the last lap or second lap to last lap, the leaders broke away and tried, out kicking everybody. And he hung with them. And in both cases, the winning times from gold, silver, medal were so close as mind-boggling. But you watched it and you see Grant Fisher coming in, and there's 5 people approaching the finish line, and it just so happens it works out he's third. And the drama of that was amazing. It was utterly amazing. And so I'm convinced that they could do stuff like that and it would work. But for whatever reason, they just went off on its last iterations now. And, now they're trying to do all this stuff about like, oh, let's get young people involved. Let's have like, mid-race points and stuff. And it's like, what? Concept of racing is we start here, we get here, the first person here wins. Now, the fact they're going in circles, I understand that. But to start worrying about other stuff, I do agree with the Tour de France, where they've got interim points on a stage. First person to top this hill gets points, that kind of thing. But that's for secondary accomplishments. That's not for like the championship of the race. So Paul Harris says Jay Leno received the last police production model of the Dodge Charger. What's Dodge going to do? They won't have a car to offer police. Maybe the Dodge Charger. I'm not sure. I never really followed that, but I know that the car companies often have these big 4-door sedans that they, sell in fleets to the car companies. And of course, many of the car companies now have gone over to things like, Explorers and so on, or Durangos or whatever. And they can use those also. But they do need vehicles that can move fast and also take a beating. Because think about a police car, if it's at a police force that's on the road constantly. It's being driven and driven and driven and driven. That's where you're going to really get into the durability aspects of the build. Fatty McButterpants says ELO is on my bucket list as well. Seeing them in Boston in September, the service charge alone was more than I've ever paid for a concert ticket. I got front row tickets. I don't even want to tell anybody what I paid for them. But the Electric Light Orchestra is one of my favorite bands. And the first album I ever bought with my own money was a New World Record. And I had older brothers who had record collections, and we had a communal thing where we put all our records next to the record player, and you could listen to anybody's records. You just had to put them away and take good care of them. So I had brothers who had, Hendrix and Santana and Cream and Clapton and Zeppelin and the Rolling Stones and all that stuff. And so when I come along, I'm looking around, I'm listening to radio, and I'm digging that New World Record sound. So I remember buying that. And they toured a couple times around that era, but I didn't see shows back then. And they tour a little tiny bit now. Jeff Lynne, basically, and a bunch of the musicians that he's chosen. And he was in town 2019 or so. I did not see the show. And I was so upset because I was convinced he's never coming back. And he claims this is the last tour. So I decided, that's it. Pull out all the stops. Go in there and see that show. So there you go. Neuropilot says, would you rather watch a bunch of astronauts race cars or play in a band since they've done both? NASA wasn't amused about the car racing by active astronauts. I'm not familiar with the Max Q connection. Are we talking about Max Q, the side project of Michael Hutchins? Or am I confusing it with something else? Max Q, The Way of the World. Lewis Brown and Josh Homan. I had a 1986 Shelby TC3 Turismo, twin turbo intercooled. But how many cubic inches displacement was it? Mass Killer 469 says, I read an article that said speed restrictions on new cars are coming. Yeah, I did a video on that also. Question is how soon they'll get here and whether they'll affect everybody. And are we talking about an annoying beep, or will the cars actually govern themselves as a governor might? Randy Regal says, I used to love NASCAR. I still watch it now, but all the stages, etc., are killing the excitement. You should run the whole race like it used to. And I mean, I don't mean to be old school because I'm not old enough to remember early days of NASCAR because NASCAR started quite a while ago. Don't forget, I interviewed Richard Petty, and he said, I've been to every NASCAR race ever. Haven't missed one yet. And this is when I interviewed him. And I said, wait, you weren't old enough to race in the first year, second year? And he goes, no, I was attending them, though. He goes, I was there. I've seen them all. And, of course, his father was racing, and he was at those races. And then eventually he started racing himself. But the early days of NASCAR, I mean, there were guys who drove to the track in their race car, raced the race, and then drove that car home. Now, it got away from it pretty quickly because people like the Pettys came along and said, hey, we can make money at this. Let's make this a business. Let's make it a profession. And so that went away pretty quickly. But even in the 1960s, there were guys who were running race cars who were literally doing it as a hobby in NASCAR. And I know this because my uncle was one of them. My uncle raced mainly in USAC and ARCA, but he raced a couple of times in NASCAR. And he had a car that he put together with his own hands and paid with his own money. And he would occasionally buy used cars from other guys. And he was a mechanic, so he'd build them up himself. And then his transmission shop in Detroit sponsored him. And he'd go out and race on the weekends. And his buddies would act as crew members. I mean, it was crazy. And if he tore up a set of tires, he's like, I paid for new tires. And that's one of the things now is you look at how expensive the upper level is. How do you ever get there? And yeah, there's a whole circuit you can go through, and you start out racing go-karts and then midgets and blah, 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 blah. But it takes so much money now that it's lost any connection it ever had to the idea that you can take a car off the street and race it, and people will watch that race because they can relate to the cars being driven, and they understand the concept of a race, and they wish they could drive their own cars that fast, but they don't want to because they don't want to wreck them. So there you go. Daniel Kester says, is the Canadian robot lady in the house today? I don't think she is. She checks in. She will announce herself. Neuropilot's Max Q is the astronaut band. It's like a side project. But there was a project by Michael Hutchins called Max Q that had a song called Way of the World that came out in the late 80s or early 90s. Captain Kronk says, I think being a car guy makes you the coolest attorney on YouTube. Well, thank you. There are some cool attorneys on YouTube, though. I would say I'm just in good company there. But you got to have hobbies, right? Jay Paul says upper level racing can only be achieved with sponsorship. I mean, I can tell you things like, for instance, I went to a race in Hickory, North Carolina years ago. And Hickory was where a lot of people got their start. In fact, they called themselves the birthplace of NASCAR in the sense that so many racers got their start there. It's a smaller track. And on the racing they do there that's not upper level, they have classes of racing where, for instance, you show up at the track and they actually put all the wheels and tires in a pit, and you draw lots, and you get to go in and basically you pick the tires. So that in other words, I can't get an advantage by having more money than you and buying better tires than you. And so they're trying to level that out. And I remember thinking that's an interesting idea to handicap it that way. I also know in the old days they had races where they'd say a $500 claimer, where your car cannot be worth more than $500. And do you know how we're going to prove that? At the end of the race, if anybody wants to buy your car for $500, you've got to sell it to them. And they would do that. And maybe less than $500. But the point is that you could, if you wanted to, put a bunch of expensive stuff in your car and then sell it for $500 after the race. Why would you want to do that? You know, so there's ways to make it more fun to watch. QA Library says, have you watched The World's Fastest Indian? Yes, I have. When I watched it, I didn't know that Indian was a manufacturer of motorbikes. It changes the name. The name's meaning quite a bit. But yeah, Indian is one of the two heritage motorcycle names in America. And Indian, it went out for a while, but it's back now as far as the name goes. But Indian and Harley, especially back in the day, there were some cool bikes. And yet Indian's a manufacturer. Lewis Browning says, not the car, it's the driver. Yeah, exactly. James Nordbeck checked in late. Did your Viper get wet yesterday? Kind of. It got rained on, and I drove it on wet roads. I was not driving in a downpour, though, or anything like that. So, Blue Freaker says Leonard French is cool. He is. Specializes in intellectual property law, copyright, trademark, things like that. Really, really interesting guy. I've been on his show a couple of times. We did some collaborations back in the day. Very, very funny guy. Very, very nice guy. Gilbert, just throwing out another factoid to get us all wondering. First husband's family made motorbikes in 1902. Schickel. Schickel. DX Gypsy, Hickory, North Carolina resident here. I love Hickory, North Carolina. It's a beautiful town. I've been there a few times. I got another good friend there named Samantha who plays the guitar. But DX Gypsy, I love that place. I love the track. I've been to the track a bunch of times. I mentioned a story before, but I took a road trip with my Shetland sheepdog Wolfie. Milo had passed away, but I was invited down to speak in an interview that was put into a documentary that was put out by ESPN about Bobby Isaac. And they said, "Is there any chance you can get to Hickory? We're doing a bunch of interviews there." I said, "Absolutely, I love Hickory." So Wolfie and I jumped in the truck. We drove on down there, did the interview, and we drove back. And while there, met some very, very cool people. And I've been inside that track before. It's such a neat place, and you just feel the history of it. It's like if you go to a baseball diamond, and they say, "Oh, by the way, like Babe Ruth played here or something." You're like, "Oh, you can feel it." And Hickory is cool. DX says Hickory is home of NASCAR, but the residents drive like Keystone Cops. Gilbert says the Schickel Motorcycle Company was apparently in 1912, which it's still early. It's still way early. Tornado James says, speaking of factory cars racing, how do you think a turbine car would fare in a race? Well, don't forget they tried that a couple of times at Indy. 2 years they had turbine cars in the field. They didn't finish, but they finished they dropped out for other reasons. It was not mechanical failures. They were competitive. And in fact, I believe they were four-wheel drive because they had that much power. And they actually do well if you think about it. When you consider the idea that turbines do well when they're running at a steady speed as opposed to full throttle, idle, which is one of the things that hurts them when it comes to driving and stop and go traffic, for instance. Native Atheist said, I heard Orange County choppers aren't even road legal. I don't know about that, but I've heard some complaints about how sturdy they are. In other words, these are like show bikes that are great looking when you see them standing still. But I've seen some videos where people complain and said, "Hey, this is an Orange County chopper here, and it doesn't actually do that well." So, Elliot says, "I believe Car Shield and Endurance do not cover seals and gaskets and do not cover claims. I can't think of any part of a car that doesn't have seals or gaskets. Thus, they can deny all claims." Well, what happens is they'll say we don't cover the failure of those things. And so if your water pump goes bad, they can't say, well, the water pump's got a gasket on it, therefore we're not going to cover it. However, what they do is they say, we'll cover parts that fail so long as it wasn't a loss caused by the failure of a seal or gasket. But they'll also say, if we do repair it, you got to pay out of pocket for the seals, gaskets, hoses, clamps, and they start listing all these other things. But I have seen, it depends on the company, where they'll say things like, we don't cover any lubricated parts. So Elon Bad disagrees, says that hearing turbine cars always makes me laugh, despite the fact that if you watch, for instance, Jay Leno's interview yesterday in WDIV in Detroit, he repeatedly said turbine car. But little rigs I am still here. Good to hear. Good to hear. Tigerman99515 says Jay Leno was one of those critics of OC choppers. I've never heard him talk about them one way or the other, but it doesn't surprise me. I've not watched all of his videos. Neuropilot says cars could have to be a turbine electric hybrid, which would be great for endurance racing, maybe. Yeah, and that actually is not a bad idea. People put cars together that have motors in the wheels and then a turbine with a generator creating electricity. So you got to still put fuel in it, but you're driving with electric motors. And so there'd be some advantages to doing it if it was done right. Blue Freaker says the crime scene car shield ads were cringe. Oh, yes. Yes, they were. And sadly, they've got people with names who are endorsing that stuff. And it ain't good. It ain't good. Big T says if the radiator hose blows and the car overheats, well, then the head gasket blows, so no coverage. Well, no, they'd say it's a hose failure. We don't cover hoses. But they might also say your head gasket blew. We don't cover the head gasket. So there's a list of exclusions that's this long, and if you read it, it will scare you. And that's the problem is if you watch the television ad, they go, call this 800 number. Well, they can't have you read this list of disclaimers over the phone. And there's a big disclaimer at the bottom of the ad on the television. And I've got a decently sized TV. I've frozen it. You can't read it, but it's not there long enough. Ian, the Ghost Rider Jeeping Trucker, is considered checking out recently. Still here in this striking around or stalking around. Well, dude, if nothing else, we'd miss you. So remember, wherever you are in the week, go. But wait, how far off is Sunday? We can do a talk with Steve and friends over there at Lehto's Law. Oh, the channel's called Steve Lehto, but oh boy. Mass Killa 469. Whatever happened to that guy that built a motor and car that ran on air? There was a guy out of Ohio who ran a hoax where he claimed he built a car that ran on water, and he actually got some local journalists to cover it as if it was serious. And now there's people out there like, oh my God, it was real. I can show you the TV coverage. It's like, yeah, once in a while they actually get on TV. It doesn't mean it's real. So Gripe Globe says gripe, LOL. Tornado James, do you think that lawyer text should be regulated to be larger? Well, that's always the thing is when you go into court and you go, look, they never told me about this. They go, yes, we did. It was in the disclaimer. And then you show it to a jury and go, is that a disclaimer? But the problem is that disclaimers and their effectiveness is usually a question of law for the judge, not the jury. So it can get ugly there too. Patrick Squires, how does one find independent representation for auto insurance claims for auto damage repairs? This a thing? I'm not sure. I've heard of people trying to do that. They get an adjuster to come in, independent adjuster come in and explain what their losses are. But the problem is that the insurance company's got their adjuster, and you might get them to move a little bit. I don't know. But one thing I can tell you is that when they make you an offer on something that's complex, like, I don't know, rebuilding your house and replacing everything inside of it, their first offer is simply a jumping off point. It is a starting point for negotiations. And so if they owe you $100,000, they're going to offer you 75, see if you take it. And some people will take it because they want to get their project back on the road, you know? So Gilbert says, yeah, it has to be on the internet to be real. So putting a television news piece onto YouTube 15 years later doesn't count, right? Oh, they really showed the car running on compressed air. How do you compress it, though? It takes energy to compress it. Blue Freaker says, there goes my body acting fast from my mind. I should have said crime drama since the car shield ads I'm talking about were a whole... No, I got that. They have the ad where they're acting as if they're at a crime scene. They go, oh, this car died before its time. I think we all got that. Lewis Browning says Steve engines do run off of water. No, they run using water, but the energy source isn't the water. Otherwise, I could see my Explorer runs off water too because the radiator's filled with this stuff. Carl's Corner, car shield sucks. I've been dealing with them for 3 weeks. You bought one? Good luck to you, my friend. I hope it works out. I've heard nothing but bad things, except for their ads on TV, which are all good. J. Paul says, I saw a guy on YouTube who got an 8-cylinder run great on a lawnmower carburetor after he posted it and never saw another post by him. But the question is, did it get better gas mileage or did it just run? I mean, so. Ian the Ghost Rider, thank you, Steve. Just thinking a lot lately since most of my friends and family are gone. So I'm beating myself up a little. Well, sorry about that. And everybody goes through rough patches. And unfortunately, there's no justice to how they happen. And I can think of times in my life where I was in a rough patch. 2 years I spent in a small town at a radio station that paid me minimum wage. And what's one thing I can tell you is that if you make it to the end and you come out and you're like, oh, I feel better now. You're going to look back on it and go, you know something, even though I didn't appreciate it at the time, maybe I can learn something from that. Maybe I did learn something from that. And I know now that I look back on major portions of my life and go, I actually learned a lot from that and it actually made me stronger. So that, that is something that you can think about. So there you go. Pontiac 411 says the 100 mile per hour, I see the 100 mile per gallon carburetor still pops up. Believe it or not, I saw Haggerty sent out an email to its friends over the weekend, said 3 car hoaxes, and they listed the 100 mile per hour carburetor, which is an urban legend, and it's even in the Vanishing Hitchhiker books, which are about urban legends. And the story goes that a friend of a friend went to the dealership and bought this car right off the truck, and realized they had to put gasoline in it after they owned it for like 3 weeks. Went to a gas station, put some gas in it, but it hardly took any. And they're like, what the? They did the math on it. And it's getting like 200 miles to a gallon or some crazy number. And so something else happened to it where they had to take it to the dealership to have like, I don't know, the window crank fixed or something. And the guy goes, oh, by the way, dude, he goes, this car gets like 200 miles to the gallon. The salesman goes, really? Hang on. The salesman goes in and whispers. The next thing you know is a crowd of people whisper. And they go, yeah, we need to take your car and put it in the shop to fix your window crank or whatever it is. And then, of course, they can see him back there tearing off parts and putting on new parts. And they give it back to the guy. And now it gets 12 miles to a gallon. Because the company accidentally sold the one that gets 200 miles to a gallon. Which I think it probably started out as a joke. More than anything else, but now of course it is an urban legend. Daniel Kester, ever hear of the Dale? Yes, the Dale car was a company. Really strange story. There's like a 3 or 4 part documentary about the Dale, D-A-L-E, and it was this person. I say that because when the story started out, I believe he identified as a male, and by the time it was over, he identified as a woman. And at the time, there were allegations that the person had done that in an attempt to hide, but raised money from investors, claimed to have this car that was going to get insane gas mileage and cost hardly anything and blah, blah, blah. And at one point in time, the inventor even talked, I believe it was The Price is Right, to offer one as a prize on the game show, as if they had one to give away. They didn't. But anyways, yeah, the Dale is a fascinating story. But no, none of them ever came up. So, INOB Security says that's exactly what you'd expect them to say in a cover up. Yeah, of course. And then, of course, the real question is, if it was invented one time, wouldn't somebody else have invented it by now? So, in other words, the 200 mile an hour carburetor has gone by the wayside. We're all doing fuel injection now. Or gallon, sorry. William Ford, I identify as an adult. Yeah, Lewis Browning says the Dale was pitched as a hyper-efficient, innovative vehicle come to save the day in the wake of high gas prices. It had weird futuristic styling and a 3-wheel platform built from some motorcycle stuff. And that's the thing. You can say you're going to do those things, but make one that works. I mean, Tucker built 51 cars. Say what you like about him, but he built 51 cars. The Dale, my understanding was that they built a prototype that never quite worked and didn't deliver those numbers. And so you can't be out promoting it and saying what it's going to do because everyone makes these outrageous claims. Redneck Coder, did you see the 40 mile per hour gallon V8 with a lawnmower carb? YouTuber built it with a computer controller. No, that's what somebody else asked. I wasn't sure if it actually did something spectacular or not, but that would be the question. And I saw somebody else. Oh, Josh Gibson, Joshua. Did you know Dr. Jack Kevorkian? And thank you for calling him a Michiganian, as opposed to a Michigander, or possibly interview. I spoke to Dr. Jack Kevorkian once. I bumped into him. He was getting signatures. He's running for office in Michigan, and he didn't win, but he got himself on the ballot. And I personally liked Dr. Jack Kevorkian. I think that he stood up for something that a lot of people believe in. And he's one of those people who actually said, if you're going to arrest me and throw me in jail for this, I still think I'm right. Therefore, go ahead and arrest me and throw me in jail. And so I saw him. Someone told me he was up at the Royal Oak Post Office getting these signatures. So at the time, I was promoting my book, Death's Door, about the Italian hull disaster. And I'd heard someplace that he's a fan of history. So I went and saw him, and I introduced myself. Hey, Dr. Kevorkian, my name is Steve Lehto. I'm a lawyer. My office is right up the street here in Royal Oak, and I want to let you know that I admire you and your work. You know, and I think your convictions are something that I admire. He said, "Oh, thank you." And I said, "I heard that you like history." And he said, "Yes." I said, "You ever heard of the Italian hull disaster?" He said, "No." And I said, "Here's a book I wrote." He goes, "Really? You wrote this book?" I said, "Yes." And I signed it to him and gave it to him. And they put out a documentary about him a year or so later. And he's sitting at his desk talking to the interviewer. My book is laying on the desk right there. And I've got screen grabs of it. There's my book on the desk of Jack Kevorkian in a documentary. So it's not really a claim to fame. It's not the same as when Jay Leno put it on his headline segment, but it's there. So there you go. Jumped on me again. Does that. Thug Love, your laugh in between the show, it throws me off. Are you referring to my laugh during the show? I laugh? I apologize. I have people tell me they like my laugh. Kevin Smith says some people only talk to Dr. Jack Kevorkian one time. I understand you're joking. But of course, believe it or not, Kevorkian, one of the things that they do know is he would consult with somebody. And the number of people who contacted him who said, I want your help. He would go through all these requests for help and find the most dire circumstances that somebody could be in medically, where somebody says, I am living in constant pain. Doctors can do nothing for me. My quality of life is zero. And I want help. He would then meet with these people. He would get their permission to videotape the interviews. He would meet with their loved ones. He would document all of this. At the very, very end, he would say, you know, if this is still something you want to do, and he'd go through all of that. And so it cut both ways, because that's how they managed to eventually convict him, is they had videotapes going, he admits he did this. Look, he's talking to this person, he's consulting with them. And jurors in almost every case up until the end would watch the videos and go, oh my God, I feel so sorry for that person. Look how much pain they're in. And jurors had a hard time convicting him because they thought what he's doing is a service. These people sought him out. He wasn't going door to door, knocking on doors, looking for people. They came to him. And that was a very, very important thing. So I understand the joke. I'm just pointing that out. Angel Castillo says, I block all ads. Enjoy a coffee. I mean, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Some people don't even stop to think about this. I'm going to let you know. I do live streams at least once a week, occasionally twice. I will demonetize the live stream until it's done. So if you watch this live, you won't see any ads. You shouldn't see any ads. And then when it's done, I go back in and I edit it and I go, okay, turn the ads on now. So there'll still not be any mid-roll ads, but there might be an ad at the beginning. But, you know, I think if you're going to be here live and you know I'm here, I'm not going to make you watch an ad before you can talk to me. I don't know why. But to me, that just seems wrong. Mindbend, didn't Geoff Fieger get famous with Dr. K? And here's the thing. Yes, Fieger was a very, very well-known and well-respected personal injury attorney doing medical malpractice. And he was doing quite well for himself. And he got a gigantic judgment against a hospital in Royal Oak. Gilbert knows what I'm talking about. And he got a judgment that made the news because it was so large that when 28 days passed or whatever the appeals period ran on that was, they hadn't paid him yet, and he wanted to get paid. He went and got a writ of execution and got a sheriff's deputy to accompany him with a bunch of rider rental trucks and showed up at the emergency entrance and walked in the front door with the sheriff and the writ and said, we're here to start taking the stuff unless someone cuts me a check for these millions of dollars owed to my client. Long story short, they paid him. They cut him a check. And that story made the news. And Dr. Jack Kevorkian needed an attorney and saw that story and said, I want a guy like that to defend me. And Fieger was not known for his criminal defense skills. He was known for his trial skills, especially on medical malpractice cases. However, he did so well, and Kevorkian was in the news so often that it became this gigantic spotlight shined on Fieger and Kevorkian. And everyone knew Fieger. Fieger became a household name in Michigan as a result of that. And you have to remember the one time during the tail end of Kevorkian's activities, he got convicted, but he had fired Fieger because Fieger had said, look, if I'm your attorney, you're going to follow my advice. And my goal here is to win and to get you, found not guilty. And Kevorkian, I think towards the end, actually wanted to go to prison to kind of prove a point. But Daniel Kester says, Steve, you do laugh during some of your comments. I like it. Show you're liking what you're doing. Love your videos. Thank you. Thank you. Captain Kronk says, I have YouTube Premium. No, that's fine. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about me. William Kittlestad says, catching up 2 times. Speak slower so I can catch up quickly. Have to make time go by slower too. Max Wedge, I enjoy your videos. Victor Jason, what's the silliest ad you have in your video? I don't see the ads because I don't sit here and watch my own videos. And keep in mind that the ads are probably tailored to you anyways as to where you are and your demographics and so on. So I don't know. But I've had many, many people tell me that I do an ad where I rip on RVs. And they'll go, I just saw a Winnebago ad. Because something said, oh, he's talking about RVs. Let's put up an RV ad. The other one is I've been told that there have been Hertz ads run in front of my videos ripping on Hertz. I don't know if I've ever said a good word about Hertz. I can't imagine, but I've done dozens of videos about Hertz does it again. And apparently people have got to watch a Hertz ad. The best thing would be if the Hertz ad said, we won't do this to you. Rent our cars. So Tim Britton says, Fieger is a customer of mine. Okay. Yeah, I've only met Geoffrey Fieger once. I was at a restaurant in Bloomfield Hills, right around the corner from Macus, Gilbert. And Fieger was standing there, and he's one of the most recognizable people in Michigan. He's got a very unique hairstyle. And I saw him, and I walked over and said, Mr. Fieger, I'm a big fan. I go, my name's Steve Lehto. I'm an attorney. He's, oh, nice to meet you. He's very gracious because I'm just a lemon law attorney who, he and I would never cross paths in court. And I said, oh, and I voted for you too, because he ran for governor. And he goes, oh, thank you. He did get elected, but I tried. Kelly Ramsey says, I'm on Dr. Kevorkian's side. J. Paul always loved me a good Steve live stream. Best talk ever. I mentioned at the top, I did a live stream on Tuesday, and I had 3,000 people in the room. And that video is now over 200,000 views, which for a live stream is insane. So I might try to do a live stream from time to time during the week. So again, I can't promise any day of the week. That just happened because there's a story that came out. I wanted to update it quickly. But I'm going to start thinking now, hey, maybe once in a while. I think that live stream is around 5 or 6 p.m. Eastern time. So people on the East Coast wouldn't be at their desks, but people on the West Coast might still be on. And I'm talking about your figurative desk, not your actual working in an office cubicle desk, because nowadays, who does that? So Isaac Hempseed says, realizing there's no shop that does manual transmission work within an hour of my place in Southwest Michigan. Crazy. Really? I find that surprising also, but it also, I guess, depends. Are we talking about a manual transmission in like a car built by the big three semi recently or not? Because I'd have to imagine you could take it to a dealership for that, but then of course you're going to deal with a dealership. So, Gilbert says you were at Burger King. No, Burger King's across on the other side. I was at Bo Jack's. You know what I'm talking about, and don't pretend you don't. John Zabelak says, Steve, I wear a medium-sized T-shirt. I'm age 65. How long till I can wear a double XL? Okay, here's the thing. I'm husky, but I'm also tall. And don't forget that all these measurements, T-shirts are sized, right? You can't go, I want a shirt that's got this waist and this shoulder and these arm lengths. No, it's T-shirt. So I can wear an XL a lot of times, but sometimes it's double X is always safe. But I haven't worn a medium shirt since junior high. So you're doing well, my friend, unless you're like, 4'3" or something. Tim Britton says, I never met Fieger. He subscribes to 4 newspapers. You deliver them to his office or his home? Because I've got friends who work in his office. In fact, I mentioned before, if you watch the TV ad where there's a guy saying, we are Fieger Law and all we do is win, that's a former student of mine. He went to U of D Mercy. I taught a class he was in. So I've spoken to him a couple of times since then, but it's amazing to me. I mean, when you're teaching a law school class, you know that there are going to be students who become lawyers because that's what they do. Now, I had students from Canada. We're going to go back to Canada and practice law. I might never cross paths with them again, but the bulk of them. And so, I've over the years bumped into 1 or 2 here and there and that kind of thing. And it was just so hard for me to wrap my head around that I'm sitting in a waiting room at a car dealership. I won't go into it. It's a long story. Someday I will. And they got a TV on showing local television. And it's nothing but lawyer ads and pharmaceutical ads, okay? And on comes the one for Fieger. And I look up at the screen and go, hey, I know him. You got to understand, he doesn't just work there. He's high enough up to where he's making the commercials saying all we do is win. Okay? So that's pretty cool. Lewis Browning, are you sure it wasn't a Burger Chef? Isn't Burger Chef gone? I'm trying to remember when the last time I saw Burger Chef was. Old school. Denise Maurice says, my husband got a judgment against a defendant and took 3 sheriff's deputies to the airport to go levy on a regional jet. He got paid. He really wanted the jet. Gilbert's leaving. Got to go. Thanks for checking, my friend Gilbert checking out. But Denise, the interesting thing is I had a friend of mine get a judgment against Chrysler, and he didn't pay it. And he calls the attorney and goes, dude, where's my check? And the attorney goes, well, we ordered it. It'll get you when it gets here. And most of these things go so smoothly that you don't even worry about. The checks will get here. They almost always do. My friend was convinced that he needed to step it up a little bit. He got a writ of execution and sent a sheriff's deputy to the Chrysler World headquarters. This is long before all the different name changes. And the sheriff's deputy walks in the front door with a writ, lays it on the counter, and goes, we need a check for this amount of money, or I'm going to start taking stuff. The first question always is, what are you going to take? And the sheriff is smart. He goes, I don't know. Your phone, your computer, maybe the chair you're sitting on. I'm going to take it out and sell it at an auction. And oh, how fast they jump on that phone and they get someone down there and cut a check. It's the weirdest thing. And by the way, I have a friend who worked for a long time at one of the big 3. And he told me, Steve, I'll tell you a secret. I go, what's that? And he goes, I've had a situation before where my boss came in and said, hey, we need to get a check to this person today. My friend says, well, where are we in the process? And the boss says, we dropped the ball. There is no process. Check request was never submitted, but they need the check today. My friend said he knew how to do it. You run over here, do the check request, run over here, get it approved, run over here. And he had to run around like a chicken with no head, telling people, I need this approved right now because my boss said to do this. But he had to check, and he got it that person that day. They can do it. They just don't like to. They just don't like to. So there you go. Silly Goose 41, what's up, Steve-O? Steve-O. Elon Bad says bank transfers are better than checks. They're instant. You know, that's the interesting thing, you know, like Zelle, for instance, where you can Zelle someone money and it just shows up in their account. But I'm always worried about things that are like on my screen. If I come back an hour later and I open it up, it's not there. Where did it go? And do I have proof of it? Like, don't have to hit print to have copies. I do occasionally write checks. So Max Wedge says, are the speed traps legal with painted lines in the road and a stopwatch? I've always wondered about that. Theoretically, that is a way to measure speed, but I've always wondered about that. I know that in the old days, they'd have airplanes up above, and they'd mark the lines in the road, and the guy'd have a stopwatch and say, oh, he just covered that mile in 45 seconds. What does that equal out to? And do the math on it and say, oh, that's average speed of such and such. I do the math when I'm a busy man. But Bob Blah Blah just checked in. Thank you, my friend. Good to see you. But you know how they measure the speed. It's simply a matter of they can convince a judge or a court that's how it works and that it was accurate. And if you can convince a judge that it's not accurate or there's something wrong with that on cross-examination, you might win. You never know. Lowell Riggs IM. Starbucks is trying to figure out why its sales are falling. Perhaps they want to turn around their slumping sales. They could stop raising prices. You mean there's a direct relationship between higher prices and lower sales, or lower prices and higher sales? Wouldn't that be an amazing thing if that was true? Oh boy, John Zablek, Burger Chef equals burnt plastic. I remember a fast food restaurant called Sandies. That was a burger chain up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I think they only had a few outlets. They got bought up by Wendy's. And it was one of those things I was thinking about. I'm going to put Sandies. Why do I remember Sandies? And I looked it up and I found people talking about it. There was one in Marquette. And I remember eating at a Sandies Marquette. I mean, I remember seeing them more than once. But I remember eating at one on one particular occasion because it was the first place I ever saw one of those cash registers that dispensed change, where it came down and went into the little tray, the little ashtray there. What? That's cool. It makes change. So there you go. Bubba Cleveland, Bob Lob, Finnish. I think Bob Lob is just a fan of the Finns. But in reality, aren't we all? Low Riggs IM says that Burger Chef had the Works bar, but they got bought out by Hardee's. And Hardee's, I think, also bought out Sandies. So Ed G asks a question many people probably wondered. Can a law firm hold on to a settlement check and an interest-bearing account to gain more money for them? No, not in most states. Most states have what's called an interest-only lawyer's trust account or equivalent. And in Michigan, that's what we call it. It's called an IOLTA account, interest-only lawyer trust account. And mostly smaller checks get put into that. And the interest from those payments goes into a state bar fund that funds a couple things that are considered to be good and so on. And that's been upheld by the Michigan Supreme Court. But larger checks are deposited into an interest-bearing account that pays the interest to the client. And I've had occasion to have very, very large checks pass through my sphere of influence and actually opened up an account just for the couple of days that check was going to be there because it was going to be a significant amount of interest, believe it or not. But in my case, it's not often the case. So, but an interesting question, but that wouldn't make any sense. Well, Bill 57 says, I love it when McDonald's raises their prices because the more they raise them, the more I save because I don't go there. Scott Summers says Sandies, or isn't it Wendy's? Well, no, it was Sandies, and then it was bought by Hardee's, I believe. Larry means we had a Sandies in Oklahoma, then got bought by Hardee's. Maybe it was not just a Midwest thing, or maybe it was not just a Michigan thing. I don't know. Mike Huey, as a disc jockey, you talk a lot about musicians. What are your thoughts about engineer Tom Dowd? Name doesn't ring a bell. I'm not as up on, if you're talking about sound engineers or the production folk or any of that, I'm not as up on them. I know guys are really into that stuff. Oh my God, this guy did the sound on the last, Michelle Shocked album. Just trying to yank out something weird for you. Gina Maria Italiano says, hello from Buckeye County. Buckeye Country. We had Sandy's fast food here back in the early to mid 60s, and that would be about right. So maybe it was more of a Midwestern thing. I was only remember seeing the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, but that'd be a while back. Bob blah blah used to go to Hardee's Works bar and buy a hamburger, then fill the bag up with a fresh salad. Worked for a while before I got thrown out. I once went to an all-you-can-eat, not making this up. I went to an all-you-can-eat buffet at it was not Chinese, I believe it was a Vietnamese restaurant in Ann Arbor. It may have been Chinese, but I keep thinking Vietnamese. And so you go over there and you take a plate and you fill it up and you go over and eat, and they tell you, bring back don't bring back your plate, but get a clean plate if you're going to get more. It was all you can eat. And I saw a woman pay, walk over, fill up her plate, go and eat, and come back. And she started pulling styrofoam containers out of a bag that she had with her, like a canvas bag. And she literally was filling them up with all the expensive stuff. So all the chicken, she filled one with chicken, all of it. And she went over, she filled another one. And I'm watching this going like, what? And there were people who ran the restaurant watching it, kind of like, and it's like, if someone's loading the stuff up into their own container and they're abusing it like that, you can stop them. Like there goes the profit for the last 20 people who just ate here. And they didn't stop her. And she loaded it all up and she walked out with it. I'm like, she walked out with like 20 pounds of protein. And it's all you can eat, presumably on the premises, not like all you can eat like the next week, so. Steve G, I hope you have a round table pizza. I'm not familiar with that. Is that a regional thing? Blaze your O2 LS. Ever listen to WION from Ionia, Michigan? I'm familiar with it. I know they live stream, but I've not listened to it much. But yeah, WION. It's a great set of calls for Ionia, Michigan. IONIA, Ionia. Amber Miss 69. Speaking of food, what's your least popular food choice? Well, there's things I don't care for. My mom used to make egg salad sandwiches, and I used to like flee the building. I didn't care for them. And I'm trying to think, but yeah. Scott Summers says, suppose Sandy's is mainly anywhere from Saginaw and below. But the one I'm talking about is in Marquette, which is way north of Saginaw. Bubba Cleveland says McDonald's was killing it in the 80s. Arby's killing it in the 90s. Subway reigned in the early 2000s. So Subway had better bread and ingredients back then. Don't forget that, if you talk about just sheer number of stores, Subway will let you open a store across the street from another Subway. They don't care. I've been into some Subways that were really, really good, and I've been in some that were just horrible. And a number of times I've been in a Subway restaurant where there's one person in the building other than the customers. So they take your money, they build your sub, they bag it, they charge you for it, and run back down and grab the next person. And it's like, oh God. So there you go. Drag Pack Merc says I can confirm there's a Sandies in Stillwater, Oklahoma. I'm hoping these are all related. Because remember, the Sandies had a logo. I think it was a woman wearing like a dress that had like a tartan pattern on it. Not normally into tartan patterns, but I remember that. Like the Bay City Rollers. Not a band account. How soon can America return to the gold standard on dollars? Well, they can think about it all they want. Whether they're going to do it, I'm not sure. Yeah, good old days. You have a piece of paper in your wallet. This is good for $1. And you take it to a bank and go, I don't like this paper anymore. Can you give me that in silver certificate? Or you got a $20 bill and you take it to the bank. I'd rather have a $20 gold piece. What do you say? Good old days. Scrapman50 says, don't forget the same person cleans the toilets in the store. Yeah, that's if they clean them, because they haven't got time to clean them because they're too busy making the food and running the cash register. Trevor Bickle, how about deviled eggs? No, I'm not a big fan of deviled eggs. Sorry. Cyberdoc, welcome back from the cruise. Wanted to hear about it, but got back late. I talked about it at the top. Went to the Dream Cruise yesterday. Saw Jay Leno get his car presented to him at Williams International. He then brought it over to the Dream Cruise, showed it off at the Dodge display in Bloomfield Hills, I believe, and then brought it up to Williams International picnic/party they hold every year. Saw it there. He took pictures of all kinds of people, talked to all kinds of people. I met all kinds of great people there as well. And it's good to see my good friend Jay. Hadn't seen him since he performed live at a casino in mid-Michigan a while back. I guess he's also performing again, I believe, in Flint, Michigan, coming up rather soon, doing stand-up. Might go see that as well. But it was a lot of fun. But the cool part was that the turbine car is repaired. It does run. And it's so fun to watch somebody get in there and just hit the key and it spools up, and it's a beautiful sound. I shot video. I took pictures. I've already shot the me talking part. Me Talk Pretty One Day. It's a book by David Sedaris. I've already shot the talking part, and I'm now assembling it, and I'm going to put that video on my main channel probably tomorrow. So watch for that. There'll be a video about the resurrection of Jay's turbine car on my channel with some good footage of the car driving, and you'll be able to hear it. I will shut up long enough to let you hear it. Justin Stevenson, hello from Idaho Falls. Thanks for checking, my friend. Drag Pack Merc says he remembers the logo being the tartan skirt young lady. So there you go. I'm not sure his discussion has gone off the rails, but Drag Pack Merc says that the dumpster at the Dollar Tree. I'm sorry. John Zablak says the dumpster at the Dollar Tree was the best. Joe Cram says Monterey Car Week and the Dream Cruise happened at the same time. Believe it or not, that's been a problem in the past because Pebble Beach. I know Jay Leno's been there instead of at the Dream Cruise before. And so for him to come to the Dream Cruise, he misses that. So KG's checking in from Japan. Thank you for checking in, my friend. I appreciate that. Cyberdoc says the turbine car is alive, making Jay happier than a clam at high tide. I've been watching the Beverly Hillbillies lately. That show is ingenious. And every time Jed says something like that, it's different. He never repeats one of those phrases. And he'll say, oh, it's crazier than this or happier than that or whatever. And every single time it's different. And it's fascinating to watch how they wrote that show. Standard deviations. I saw that turbine car at Calabasas car meet many years ago. You mean Jay brought his turbine car there? Because I know that he would show up at car events, just bring it. Like Cars and Coffee. Hey, here's Jay with his turbine car. Sean M., what's the value of Jay's turbine car? It's hard to say. I don't know what he paid for it. But I do believe that it's like a Van Gogh. There's so few of them out there that if you wanna buy one, you got to find someone who's got one for sale and then make them an offer they can't refuse. So there's not really a ready market to establish on that. Bob Blah says Sandy wore a red and black plaid beret. Was her skirt visible in any of her advertising? I'll do some work on this, and I'll come back. Fat Blue says, I remember 19 cents a gallon gasoline, I'm guessing. I remember being 25 cents a gallon. I remember that during price wars, because there was a time when you could drive down Woodward Avenue and every major mile road, there'd be 4 gas stations, one on each corner. Now, they made money doing service also, but they thought, well, if we get you in here with gas, maybe you'll come here for service also. And so there was a time when they would literally sell gas probably at a loss just to get people in. Mass Killer 469 said Jay Leno do a speed run in the turbine car and the windows blew out. That's his other turbine car. He has 3 turbine-powered vehicles. He's got a turbine motorcycle, a turbine car that's custom built around a jet engine, and then he's got the Chrysler turbine car. So he didn't do a speed run in the Chrysler turbine car because it would have been fun to watch, but you don't want to do that. So Cliff Allingers and Steve talks pretty. There you go. So Daniel Kester, I'll bet Mr. Leno is happy that his car is back and running. Yes, he is, my friend. Yes, he is. And, I saw him last year at the Dream Cruise, and he showed up and his car was there, but the engine was out, and they had it on display, and they're talking about the progress they had made so far. And but I walked up and said, "Hey, how you doing? Good to see you." And it was the first time I'd seen him since he had the accident where he burned himself. And fascinatingly, even then you couldn't tell. So obviously, it was a serious injury, but he's recovered completely. Casper Chrysler turbine car at museum. Which museum? Several museums have got them. Art S, did you know that Civil War officers needed to buy their own? Tiffany made swords back then. I assumed that was the case because you often see a ceremonial presentation sword some officer carried, and it's so engraved and ornate that you go like, did the government pay for those? Like, that seems a little extreme. And so I would assume they'd get some standard issue, like, wrist breaker, but then they'd get that engraved one. And so on the shelf behind me, right there, is a World War I naval officer's dress sword that was lent to me as if I'm a museum by the family that is related to that guy. And that's engraved. It's beautiful. I believe it's shark skin on the scabbard. I mean, it's are you misusing it? Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, those things were works of art back then. Johnny Knoxville thinks the turbine car might be outside the 7-year parts window. I will tell you something that many people haven't stopped to think about. And Mass Killa says the Peterson, referring to a museum that's got a turbine car on display. They've got a turbine car engine on display next to the turbine car as well. I've seen that car. It's a very, very cool car, as they all are, because they're so similar to each other. But one of the things you have to remember is that when they had the fleet of cars on the road, they had, I think, 46 or 48 cars dedicated to this fleet they lent out. 50 cars total. They had 5 prototypes. So the cars that are on the road, when one broke down, they wouldn't want to stop and take it to a shop and tear it apart and diagnose it and spend time and think. They would literally yank the engine out, put in a new engine, and give it right back to the customer. They wanted this to go seamlessly. They wanted it to go seamlessly. So most of the cars that broke down back then were replaced with engine swaps. In other words, they just replaced the engine. And they didn't hang on to the blown up engines. I don't think they did. And so over the years, they had a couple extra engines. Those got eaten up along the way by people who needed them and blah, blah, blah. And Chrysler ran out of them. Jay tells the story in the documentary. And so now, when you say, oh, we're going to repair this engine, let's go find the guys who worked on the original ones. They actually said, oh, by the way, we didn't actually do this with these cars. We just yanked it out and dropped in a new one. We know how to build these, but not necessarily really good at, I don't know, tearing them apart and diagnosing them and then repairing them. Casper sees the Chrysler turbine car at the Walter P. Chrysler Museum in Auburn Hills, Michigan, or is it a different turbine vehicle model in Jay's possession? So Chrysler, when they had the program, they had 55 cars. They retained 9 at first, destroyed 46. They kept 3 of those 9 for themselves, and they sent the other 6 to museums. Okay, so there's 9 survivors. The ones that were sent to museums did not run. It's a long story, but they're disabled because they were intended to be static display. And so along the way, a couple of them were made to run, but Chrysler retained 3 of the running cars. So if you ever went to the Chrysler Museum in Auburn Hills or saw any of the Chrysler cars, those cars ran. And then Jay bought one of those 3 cars. So Jay's car was sold to him by Chrysler in, I think, 2009 as a running car. And then it was running fine up until about 3 years ago, 2021, when the engine failed. And then he enlisted Williams International, and they fixed it and they gave it back to him yesterday. So if you saw a car on display at Chrysler back before 09, it's possible it was Jay's car, but I don't think so. I think the one on display was different. You can actually tell Jay's car from the other cars because it has a couple tiny little changes they made to have instrumentation on it, because they still conducted experiments with it out at the proving grounds, and they sometimes nicknamed it the proving grounds car. But I've gone way astray for this late in the day. So yes, that all rhymed. I apologize. Obvious Captain says cheapest I remember paying for gas was 89 cents a gallon. I remember paying in the 90s, and then I remember when it went to $1, and I was about to lose my mind. I'm like, oh my gosh, if it goes over $1 a gallon, we're all going to go broke. Yeah, Keith Gregory remembers the oil embargo of 74 ended the cheap gas era. And don't forget, there were tankers parked off our shore just looking at us, like taunting us, going, hey, we'll come in and you agree to pay more. So Blue Freaker says, what about a 24-hour live stream? I've thought about it. I'm not sure. Padre, how far are you from the Michigan Raceway? You in Michigan International Speedway in Brooklyn, Michigan? I'm a good hike for a couple hours. I've been there a couple times, but it's been a while. So James Nordbeck says that was a great documentary. Thank you very much. Tigerman99515 points out that Jay technically is the first titled owner of that turbine car, and he is. He is. Mark Heil, I wonder how Jay insures his unique cars. I suspect that he gets, I've never asked him this, but I suspect that he has a policy on the whole collection and just says, here are the cars in my collection. Because think about it, he needs to have insurance on them just to drive them. But then he's got to have insurance on them in case something befalls them while they're in storage in his collection. And also, and this is a thing to think about, you might go, oh, wait, if you buy insurance on one car, it costs this much. To buy insurance on 200 cars costs 200 times as much. Oh, no, because remember, he's only driving them one at a time. He's not lending out the fleet. So I suspect he gets a downgrade on his insurance for that, right? Some kind of discount, you'd think. I don't know. I'm speculating here, but it's an interesting question. So there you go. DJAM says cheapest gas about is 13.9. 13.9 cents a gallon? That'd go out of ways. Daniel Kester says, what about the turbine car associated with Dave Lieberman? Are you referring to Letterman? Because I don't know that he has one. I've not heard that. Mass Killa 469. I have a Dodge Aspen. When I look at that car, the windshield and back windows are so huge. Dude, ever drive a Pacer? Pacer has huge wraparound window. Aquarium. Unbelievable. Joe Cram, I suspect he self-insures maybe some kind of umbrella. I'm not sure how complicated that would be in California for the driving portion of the car. In other words, you put a car on the road, you've got to have a certain kind of policy. Now, I know some big companies self-insure, but I don't know. But that's a possibility too. So. Art S says a Williams cruise missile ended up on eBay and sold it, but the guy that got it tried to get spare parts, and someone showed up at his door with black SUVs saying you're not allowed to have that. I do wonder about that. Williams does make the turbine that goes into the cruise missile. The rest of the airframe is made by somebody else, and of course, the government assembles it and puts on the business end, which, remember, cruise missile, generally speaking, you launch it one time, and it doesn't come back. It's not a boomerang. It's more like a Frisbee. But I digress. So there you go. I'm going to wrap it up right now because, of course, it is 3 o'clock Eastern time. I've been here since a little bit before 1 o'clock. I may or may not do a live stream during the week, but I will be doing those from time to time as occasion arises. Otherwise, I will talk to you, I'm guessing, next Sunday. and of course on my main channel, as I always do. Until then, behave yourself. Bye-bye.